Kick back, loosen that tie. We're talking real life now.
Welcome to Memphis Podcast, the home of Memphis. Stories, voices, and conversations that matter. I'm your host, Cassius, and we are at the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, where the entrepreneurs, creators, and community leaders come to share their message. Let's have a conversation. And today's guest, we have Mr. Vincent Demps. Look, if giving back was a class, Mr. Vincent Demps would have an A++. Today, Vincent, how are we doing today, sir?
Feeling great today. Feeling great.
Man, look, Vincent, could you tell us a little bit about your childhood coming up?
Originally from New York, born and raised in Harlem.
Harlem,
New York. You know what I'm saying? Single mom. I'm trying to find the best words to describe it, but just watch this woman, navigating through that city and watching all the struggles. And just as a young child, she motivated me. She always directed me and gave me good advice. It always seemed like she was ahead of her time with her information.
Harlem, man, it's like when you speaking of Harlem, you always think about Harlem Nights and stuff like that. Like the style of our community had and stuff like that. As like positivity being emulated on screen about Harlem and stuff like that. And then we have negative, but most of us have been positive. Like, how did that structure your childhood coming up?
Well, for us, we were strong, as far as the Black community. We always, kind of stayed together. You had your positive and your negative. I see a lot of movies now that people really celebrate, and I was familiar with those individuals, growing up in Harlem. So I kind of chuckle, when I hear stories or see various movies. But it made you resilient, what I'm saying? It made you want to strive to do better. But one of the things I will say, which always interested me as a child, we didn't really originally look beyond 18. 18 was like growing up for us. So, to be looking at myself now in my 50s, back then, our goal was just to make it 18. And it wasn't so much about survival. It was just where our mindset was because of the grind.
I know, because I understand, because, you have people like in different regions, even in Memphis, in Chicago and Detroit, they have the same, look, I'm happy I made it 19. Yeah. I'm happy I made it to this age. And and my younger me, that pushed me to be a better person, because I'm like, okay, I don't know how much time I do have, so I got to make the most of my time I have.
Yeah, you don't really get much of your, for me, I didn't get much of my youth. First of all, I graduated early, so I was in college at 16.
Really?
I skipped from the 6th to the 8th, from the 8th to the 10th.
Well, wait a minute. How does that process happen?
Well, so it's interesting because, and it goes back to college choices. I would say I was a lazy kid, but I was an intelligent kid. And my mom always made it a point to put me in programs. And I had several teachers that saw that, I was just a kid, hey, give me a C, I'm cool. And they saw I was underachieving, so they always put me in more accelerated programs. And I ended up landing up in a program going, like I said, from the 6th to the 8th grade. And then, once completing 8th grade, going from the 8th to the 10th grade. So by the time I graduated, I was, 16-year-old freshman at Fisk University.
Did your teachers really pushing you to be that better man? That's a great accomplishment. Like when 16?
Yeah. Well, I always received, the information well. So, you may have some kids say, man, I'm just going to stop going to school. Whereas with me, my mom was like, well, if you go through this program, you graduate early. I was already tired of school to begin with. So I was like, okay. Same thing with joining the military. She was like, I don't think you can do basic training. I bet you $500 you can't do it. I was like,
are you serious? Oh, you know what? So she did reverse psychology on you.
Yeah. She knew I was the one kid who was like, I'll take that bet.
You know what? I think I need to try that with my daughter. Like, you know what? I bet you can. Because she's so headstrong. She was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So no, that was pretty cool. Then I see you said something about military.
Yes.
How did that start?
Well, like I said, my mom, I was actually enrolled at Fisk University.
Right.
Didn't have the greatest first year as a 16-year-old. So I had to come back home for a year. And while I was at home, for that year, I worked for a little while. And my mom said, I think you need a little more discipline. So I don't think you can do basic training. I said, I'll take that bet. So I bet you $500 you can't do it. It's all right. So enrolled back at after I completed basic training. I went back to Fisk University. And the interesting part about that, so a year at Fisk, the next year I get called up to Desert Storm. So I get pulled out my junior year at 19. And
Are you serious?
Yeah, I get called up to Desert Storm because a lot of people don't know that back then, I don't know if it's changed much, but they don't have MP camps. And we were MP camp. So you have to call up the reservists for that. So mine was the 401st, and we went over there. We were running a prison, a POW camp.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's why. At what age?
19.
You saw all this at 19?
Yeah. And it's crazy because I was with, other students from Tennessee State, and, all of us who kind of bonded, just as because we were reluctant, at first, you just want to do college, you just want to party.
Right.
But when we got over there, we bonded, and we've been friends ever since. I've had some that have gone on.
Right.
But we've been friends ever since. We still laugh about it, when you're young and don't know better.
That situation being 19.
Yeah.
So far as how long were you in the military?
I was in for 8 years. So when I came out, they put me in the Ready Reserve. So I came back. Had to take a year off to kind of get things. It's interesting when you leave to go to the military, and I was kind of joking about it earlier. Your creditors and everybody, and all of a sudden you're not paying bills. I never forget my mom was getting calls from Sears and all these places.
For real?
Bill ain't getting paid. You know what I'm saying? She's he's gone. He needs to go out to the war.
Yeah.
So had to come back and kind of get acclimated back in.
Right.
And then went, continue back on my education.
Man, that's pretty cool. So I know I look and I see entrepreneur. How did you get that entrepreneurial bug up under your belt? Like you're like, okay, I want to. Unless there was another challenge from mom.
Right. No. I think for me, I've worked in corporate America. I've always been somebody who can sustain and exist in corporate America. Sometimes people take it difficult. I typically was a person who worked other people out of jobs. So I never really negotiated. I was telling a young man that I said, I've never really negotiated my salary. You told me what my salary was. I was like, okay, I'm going to make it up in overtime. I'm going to work hard enough that y'all going to move some people out of here. And
I'm going to get my money.
Yeah, I'm going to get my money.
Well, that's what's so crazy. So like you said, you were in corporate America. Like how did this, far as military, when did corporate America, when did it start?
Well, once I finished school, my goal was to be a lawyer.
Oh,
so
really?
So I wanted to go. I wanted to long term, and it's funny as the story goes. I wanted to be a sports agent. That was my whole goal going to college.
Right.
So I started working at a couple of firms. While I was preparing to go to law school. In the midst of that, my dad passed. So my dad, he was married 5 times. So in his will, out of his children, he had selected me to be the one to continue, moving it forward.
Really?
Yeah. Which was kind of interesting because I was meeting siblings I didn't know they existed. You know what I'm saying? Until I got to his funeral. But so that was in his will. He said, hey, he can do it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I had to kind of learn it from the ground up, get my first private investigation license. And then from there, I got 14 more licenses. And, now we got 5 offices. We got 100 plus investigators in our panel of investigators that we utilize. And we mainly do surveillance in connection to workers' compensation and liability claims.
That's so... And what age?
Did I start running the business?
Yes.
Well, with him, it was 30. At 30. At 30 is when I really got in the seat. Yeah.
At 30, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And it was, when I look back on it, he always felt like I had the gift of gab. And him and my mom they would always say I was, he got it. And I used to always think, got what? You know what I'm saying? But that was always, he would tell my mom, he's like, yeah, he got it. I want to be like him, which was interesting to me, hear adults say that.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. So far as entrepreneurship, to break off from corporate America, when you started doing your own thing, far as I know depending on somebody paying you and versus you switching over that you are depending on yourself.
Solely.
How did that feel?
Well, for me, I always kind of managed it this way. So I had a college roommate and I never forget, he told me, he said, having another business, he said, you want to give it at least 3 hours a day, every day. So I had already started my 3 hours a day, building in that direction. Fortunately enough, I had landed a pretty big background check client. And that was kind of the foundation. And then from there, it gave me the leverage to, because initially it was me. My dad, it was him, just the 3, his 3 buddies, and then got down to him when he passed.
Right.
So initially it was me, and I had to learn, the business. I reached out, and it goes back to when you talk about giving back.
Right.
I reached out to a lot of folks, at that point in Nashville, like a lot of guys that own their own investigative firm, and none of them would mentor to me. None of them would give me any advice. So I had to kind of hit the ground running. But I was fortunate when I worked at the firm that I managed the investigative side of what was going on. I was at that point, I was a lead paralegal for Lee Barfield. That was Senator Frisk's brother-in-law. So had access to a lot of things, saw a lot of things, and that kind of helped leverage me. So I was able to get my license there, because I had that history. So I was able to fast track that. I got the company license and my individual license at the same time, and just build it from there. I started getting licenses in other states, started, building relationships and, closing deals with companies.
Man, that's so crazy. So, man, I'm just sitting back like that much responsibility at 30. And I'm just like, okay, because that would freak me out. So I'm just like, well, I'm like, that's kind of like being overwhelming. Like any kids at this point?
At this point, no. I didn't have my first son until I was 35.
Really?
Yeah. Now I was married, and I take that back. I'm sorry. I was married. I had a stepson. Okay. But I didn't have my first son until I was 35.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question. Like, far as marriage and stuff. Like, okay, like how long were you married before this? Like, this was put in your lap. Like, okay, I want you to be the beneficiary of this.
What I was doing.
Yeah.
So I had been married. I got married at 28. Okay. So it was like 2 years after that. And then, during that process of putting in my 2 or 3 hours, I ended up, of course, getting divorced.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when my son was 1.
Oh.
And then the interesting thing about that, I never stopped being a dad. You know what I'm saying? Actually, his mom moved to Memphis. I was still in Nashville. So I would still come to visit. But I just continued to grind. And I landed a contract relationship with a company in Thomasville, North Carolina. So I moved to Thomasville for 5 months. It was a bigger PI company, and I learned the inner workings of how they did it. So I would drive from Thomasville to Memphis every other weekend, to spend that weekend time with my son.
Question, like, could you give me a small synopsis of what, like, far as PI? Because, when I look at PI, I'm thinking about people in the car and the folks sitting back with the cameras and, like, well, what is it like? Because, hey, that's what I see. That's what they portray on TV.
Well, it is part of it.
Okay.
Fortunately for me, and, I don't talk about it much, but I have a private investigation school. You know what I'm saying?
Really?
I'm also certified, the company is to give guys that continue education. You got to get your continuing education every year in 7 states. So we've got an online school for that. We give them Zoom classes. We teach you how to get your private investigation license, in several states. I'm only one of 5 certified trainers,
really?
in the state of Tennessee. Yeah.
Monetary wise, how is it? How can, like, if people are out here trying to delve in that type of work, how beneficiary, like, monetary wise, would they be?
Oh, it can. I mean, if you got to have that patience. You may have long days in the car because you got to wait for something to happen. You don't expect it to happen, especially on a workers' comp or a liability situation.
All right.
But there's also other avenues where you can just do background checks. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I also, because of my background, I work criminal cases, in Nashville. I've worked murder cases.
Really?
I got to go to the prison and interview people.
That's crazy. So what key experiences from your career that help you prepare for what you're doing right now?
I would say for me, I was a political science major. So, just being in that legal field, what I'm saying, kind of gave me the foundation, the understanding, the dealing with attorneys, understanding the court system. I was kind of used to chuckle with a lot of my friends. I said, everybody get nervous, they go to court. I was so used to going, and representing folks, in terms of cases who are not actually represented, but working on cases with individuals that will represent them.
Yeah.
Just comfortable. That, and then the confidence that my mom, always instilled in me. She always said, you can accomplish anything that anybody else can do.
You're sure enough correct about that. Knowing you're an entrepreneur, like, what businesses do you currently have right now?
Of course, we've got the private investigation school.
Right.
I am owner of an investigative firm. But fortunately, 2 years ago, I completed my circle. I built my dad's business, to where we are now. I started my sports agency. So, I'm CEO of my own sports agency, Elite Sports Empowerment.
Oh, really?
So WNBA, FIBA certified. We've got NBA certified agents there. Currently represent 30 players. We've got several overseas. We've got several playing domestically. I am also the board chairman of the Mary E. Demps Scholarship Fund, which is something I started in my mom's honor. After I felt like, I did what my dad wanted me to do.
Right,
my mom
right.
had a real bad stroke, and I struggled for 2 years to keep her alive, and it was, real costly, but, it's mom. But when she passed, I was like, what can I do? I've done what he asked me to do. What can I do for her to keep her legacy going?
Right.
So I started that. And of course, I'm part of a lot of organizations. Of course, I'm a Kappa. I deal with Kappa League.
Okay, my cousin, he's a Kappa.
Okay.
Yeah, Curtis Givens.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's Kappa, member 100 Black Men, Middle Tennessee. Just, I sit on and try to be as involved as possible. I just recently finished my term as the Memphis Fisk Alumni Association president.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So I know my mom was very important. Like, what things did she instill in you that you are using today still?
I think with the resilience,
Mm-hmm.
just watching, one of the things for me just growing up with my mom, as a single mom, how, there'd be issues, and I'm trying to say this the right way, but it's got to be an example I got to use.
Right.
So of course, I had my sister, and she would come home with like a field trip at the last minute. She was like the last minute person, like field trip. And you're a single mom, struggling, you know what I'm saying? And my mom would have these moments, you know what I'm saying, would of course, would upset her.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she's not beating anybody, but it would upset her.
I'm saying what moms, yeah.
But she would, after she was upset, she would be up all night. I'll never forget, she used to have a little briefcase. And in that briefcase is where she kept like all her checkbooks and everything. And she would be at the table all night. And by the time you got up that next morning, now she told you that, she was annoyed that you brought it.
Yeah.
She would hand my sister that check. You know what I'm saying? So she would rob Peter to pay Paul, as they said.
Right.
And I always, I respected that, so much. I always saw how much hard work she put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was the same thing for me. Like, just that resilience. Like, I can't, she ain't letting nothing stop her. And I was like, I ain't letting it stop me.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So I see right now, speaking about your mom, we have the Mary Demps Scholarship Fund.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So we started that about 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first year was, kind of putting everything together. We're 501c3.
Mm-hmm.
The next year, just kind of figuring out ways to of course, raise money.
Right.
I was fortunate for years. I would come to Memphis and I would play at AC Wharton's golf event.
Okay, yeah.
So I connected with Jackie Watkins, who actually helps me with mine.
Mm-hmm.
And, 5 years ago, I did the first, golf event. I said, okay, we can do a golf event. So even though, even at that point when I was living in Nashville, we did it in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been in Memphis ever since then. So we're going into year number 5. This year is great because we're doing the network mix of the night before.
Mm-hmm.
But we raise money for students to go to colleges. We've got, checks we've cut to students in various HBCUs and other universities.
That's cool. Question. I know we have because I know my in my daughter's school, they have they push college a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're in the age of now, they pushing trade schools.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you this, and it's kind of funny when you talk about the military. So going back to when I say just lazy.
Mm-hmm.
So when they gave out, you could pick your MOS, you test for it. And so I could have gone and ran those x-ray technician.
Oh.
But I looked and it was like, I don't know, I think it was like 36 weeks or something like that. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, no.
Too long.
I'm cutting to my summer. So I just settled on unit supply specialist, and MP, because it was shorter. You know what I'm saying? That was great, going to Fort Jackson, you know what I'm saying? All the women, training Fort Jackson.
Right.
But when I look back on it, had I become an x-ray technician when I was in college, I could have been working at Vanderbilt, one of these hospitals, getting paid good money while I was in school.
That's crazy.
So, when it comes down to trades and things along those lines, like even with my son, I owned a mobile car wash years ago, and I was trying to give it to him. He's like, Dad, I just feel better working with somebody. Kind of looked at him like, what? So he's shifted, since then. But I always feel like you should know something else. Like college is not for everybody. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times, sometimes when you go the college route, you still have to find your place. You know what I'm saying? You can go through and get that degree, but do you know somebody in that industry? You know what I'm saying? That's why a lot of times you have people get their degree and they end up somewhere else.
Man, that's a lot of times.
Yeah. So, if you can pick up a trade, it's good money in that. HVAC, mechanic. It's, a lot of people, kids think one thing. You know, you get caught up in them titles, but yeah.
So far as, because the main thing, like even like with the scholarship fund, do you all fund trade schools as well?
We haven't.
Okay.
We haven't, but that's actually something to think about.
Okay,
You know what I'm saying?
cool.
We kind of focus off of the majors of the individuals that, on the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It was just a thought in my mind,
Yeah.
because
It's
the
not a
main
bad
thing,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
Another question, like, what kind of scholarships do you all fund?
Okay. So typically, we've had all type of relationships. Like I can think of Results Physical Therapy. They reached out to us. This was a couple of years ago. They wanted to get more minorities into the PT field.
Okay.
And that was, one of our things where you have companies that come in and say, hey, we're going to give you this amount of money for scholarships for individuals who are pursuing, this particular field.
Gotcha.
So we may have somebody that, in the physical therapy field. We may have somebody that is going on to be a lawyer or a doctor. It just really goes off of the individuals that, on that board. But we don't just, we just don't tie it in for HBCUs. Last year we just gave a scholarship to a young man, University of Memphis.
Oh, really?
He volunteered with us every year. He would come out every year at the golf event and volunteer, and it was only right. But we have different, different applications.
That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. What do you envision for the future for your scholarship fund?
So every year we want to get better. Every year we want to continue to, raise more money and touch more lives.
Mm-hmm.
So the other part for me, you'll have a situation where somebody will say, hey, $20,000 scholarship to this one student.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, but, I'm always trying to touch as many lives. If I can get $20,000, I'd rather give give it $1,000 to all those students. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That way. And that's why with our scholarships, they're not as big. They can go $1,000, $2,000, but it's for, and we give it to you directly. That's the other thing I learned when setting up my mom's scholarship. If you go through the university, and no knock against the university, it takes away from your package, your financial aid package.
Really?
Yeah. So if you got a financial aid package of $20,000 and Mary Demps just gives you $2,000,
yeah.
Now you got a package of $18,000, and they're gonna put the $2 in there, and they give it back to you for the $20.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, so we give it to the students directly. That way you can buy laptops, you pay for your books, for the other little small things that you need.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, but that's how it's designed.
That's another reason, because one thing, like I said, when we speaking on college, I like my daughter, she says she wants to go to college, but I'm not going to just say, look, you have to do this, because I know the inner work for me going to college. I know the inner workings of how college works and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you're going to go to college, like we said previously, you got to make sure it's going to be beneficial to you in the long term, because they can say, oh, this is what's going, the field is going in 5 years, and 5 years is going away.
Yeah.
So now you left out here, and now you're an Uber driver.
Yeah.
You doing DoorDash.
Yeah.
So no, that can be, this.
Yeah, you really want to, if you can find somebody early to mentor to,
right?
Or just have, I'm fortunate, the things that I've accomplished, sacrifices I made,
Mm-hmm.
So my middle name is Vincent. My son's middle name is Vincent, and I just kind of laughed, of course, same last name,
right?
And I remember when he was young, I used to always tell him he's a boss.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say, they say I'm not a boss, Dad. He like maybe 6. I said, son, you're a boss in training.
Exactly.
And he said, and I remember telling him, I said, hey, if I drop dead today, I said, if you sit in that seat and sign your name, Vincent Demps, everything's going to keep moving.
Exactly. You ain't lying.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate that I'm training him up, to take that seat.
That's good.
Yeah.
I always like positive affirmation. Like you're trying to make sure. I do my daughter like that all the time. Look, you are great.
Yeah.
You are great. You're going to always be great. So question, the golf tournament. You said, how long the golf tournament been going?
This is year 5 for us.
What's the name of the golf tournament again?
It's the Mary E. Demps charity golf.
It's charity golf.
Yeah.
So this is named after your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you get this started?
Just, like I said, that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, our first couple of years, we played at a different golf course. But
That's
last couple of years, we've been at Pine Hill.
Pine Hill.
Okay. Pine Hill has been, the other course was great, but, we kind of had to move, and it was good making the transition to Pine Hill. We actually went to Pine Hill the first year it got renovated.
Oh.
Yeah. So when I did my golf event, I think we might have been the first or the second tournament to play there after it had been renovated.
So how are you in golf?
I'm pretty decent. I'm fortunate enough to live on a golf course.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, I can walk out to my backyard and hit a ball up to the clubhouse. So
what? Just describe the participants that are in the golf tournament.
Well, we get a range of folks. We business folks, entrepreneurs, corporate individuals. A lot of course, fraternities and sororities, participate. And it's a great time to just come together, network, have a good time, and raise money for, a good cause.
Yeah. So how do you feel the golf tournament contributes to the overall mission to what you all are bringing?
Well, I feel it does it great because also we have a lot of young youth that play. Every year we get a team from middle college. I have a classmate that sponsors them. So, Coach Butler does a great job and teaching them that game of golf. So chance for them to come, they get to intermingle with, other individuals that could possibly, provide them internships, which is something we do also, through the organization.
Right.
And just, bring the community together. And we're really fortunate that we get a lot of in-kind donations. Memphis Grizzlies, Memphis Hustle, Ortho South, like I said, Results, Carlisle Medical. We get a lot of individuals that, step up this year. Mercedes is going to come out. They're going to put
that's great.
a car
That's
out there
great.
for a hole-in-one. Our winners this year, the winning team will take them back out there for a shot at $25,000, hole-in-one contest. So, you always want to, make it interesting.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So have you had any challenges with the tournament?
Well, we've been fortunate every year that the weather has been great.
Yeah.
We hadn't had to, move it for rain or anything along those lines. So we've been very fortunate. The biggest challenge every year is just continuing to grow your number of golfers.
Right.
And a lot of times, I'm not going to say it's hard sometimes for charities, but it can be hard. And as things have changed, things are getting a little bit harder. Fortunately for us, we're 501c3, so any donations are tax deductible.
Cool. Next question, that's what I was going to say. How can the local community get involved with the Merit Demps Scholarship Fund?
Well, our website is dempsscholarshipfund.com. So it's two S's, DEMPS, scholarshipfund.com. Learn all about the organization there. You click on the events. You can see events that we have coming up. Of course, this golf event, you can register there. Or you can reach out to me, 901-799-1003. And we can, talk about registering, talk about volunteering, ways that, you can, support.
And what role do you believe the private sector should play in supporting education and community initiatives?
Well, I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. I think it's important because if you're not showing them, that's, like my involvement in a lot of organizations, is folks seeing it. We talk about that, the 100 Black men, dealing with, fifth graders, same thing, Kappa League, everything, fifth. They've got to be able to see it. If they don't see it and you don't interact with them, that's what kind of leads to everything else. I'm not saying that they get drawn into bad things, but if they don't if they don't see the future there, they can't touch it, then it's, I think, but that private sector helps to bring down crime, helps to bring to drive those kids to more positive directions. Because one of my biggest things is they're our future. They're going to be our doctors. They're going to be our lawyers. So imagine us at 80, 90 years old and who's going to be our doctors and lawyers? You know what I'm saying? Right. So we're relying on them.
So, I know you spoke on networking. How important is networking at your events?
Oh, networking is very important. For me, I've been fortunate, with all the businesses that I own, like I said, on the NIL side and building those relationships and building, helping athletes build their brand. That's what I try to pour in, into our youth, in terms of networking, in terms of, meeting that person. Hey, if you want to be this, you want to do this job, hey, let me see if I can connect you with that individual, because that person's going to give you that push. I've had, I've been resilient, but I've had people that have helped me along the way. I've had teachers that was like, oh, yeah, you can do better than that C.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So networking is huge, and that's where the golf comes in. A lot of deals are done, on that golf course.
Not to make a slick turn, speaking of NIL, when you say NIL, how do you feel about the climate of NIL right now?
Well, NIL is kind of like cybersecurity. A couple of years ago, it's like the Wild Wild West.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? NIL is still like the Wild Wild West, and I just say this, and it's no shade, but I just have to be honest, because a lot of people don't know. You know, I'm always one about seeking the information. You know, like I talk about the licenses and things. I'm finishing up a master's degree in contract law at University of Tennessee right now, and they let me take classes in, you know, in the law school. So I'm always seeking the information. I think a lot of times people are in it, but they don't understand everything that goes behind it. That's why I have the 14 athlete agent licenses, and I can do it, you know, in 14 states.
Right.
So I think that's where it gets confusing. But the purpose really of NIL is to teach you how to be a businessman or woman. It's supposed to be the money that's there if you don't make it to the next level. So if you come in and you teach this individual about social media marketing, posting, we'll just say the right things on social media, driving up your presence, you know, getting those followers, you know, doing charitable events, you know, breast cancer awareness, things along those lines. And of course, you know, being a great athlete and getting that money.
Right.
Now, once you get that money, you want to set up that foundation, that LLC, and make sure that you're managing it correctly, paying your taxes. So that's teaching you how to be a business person in some states in high school, you know, as well as in college.
Yeah.
So if you don't end up going, you know, D1 per se, or if you don't end up going, you know what I'm saying, to the NBA, you know what I'm saying, or WNBA, you can leverage that. Now you can become either that personal trainer or, you know, you can take that money and decide you want to invest in some things. There was a player that played for the Hustle recently. I could see his face. I can't think of his last name. Played for North Carolina.
Okay.
He took some of his NIL money and bought a hotel.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great investment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Without question.
So why does, what's the guy who played for Kansas?
You talking about?
The shooting guard who's doing really good, and they're he getting so much backlash about him taking the NIL money, but he's sitting out some games. He's taking himself out.
Well, so I don't know him personally, but I've heard so many different things. I've heard that, you know, he's got an injury that kind of trying to nurse to make sure that, you want to be able to take your career to the next level, and definitely somebody could take his career to the next level. But it's in any situation, you know, if somebody's paying you a certain level of money, you know what I'm saying, they're going to have certain level of expectations. You know, I talk about that with the athletes that we represent. You know, you sit down and say, hey, this is what I need, you know, each month. You know, even myself in relationship that I have, you know, say, okay, well, with that, I'm going to need this. You know, so with comes a lot of responsibility. So in the fact that he's a heck of a player at a big school, getting paid a certain amount of money, spotlight's on you.
I know. Yeah. And another thing I've been hearing, hearing whispers of people saying, okay, you know how you have contracts in the NBA, in the NFL, and so many years, now they're trying to say, okay, we need to start doing it for college. Yeah,
because you have a lot of kids that are jumping in the portal, a lot of kids that are leaving.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Kind of leaving the schools at Lurk. You know, they've gotten their money. So, you know, now you got to have conversations about buyouts. You got to have conversations about, hey, you signed a 3-year contract. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to need you here.
Yeah.
You know, it may look great going to the other school. They're going to pay you more money. But I think sometimes, and this is nothing against the athletes, you got to look at where you're going.
Right.
Are you going to play over there? You know what I'm saying? And some players, I guess maybe they just jumping from school to school to get the money, but the goal is to, you know, to get to the big stage.
That's what you would think the goal is, to get to the big stage, but some people are they're getting the money grabs. So. Yeah, but we're going back to the actual golf tournament. What is your main goal, and what do you want to tell the people about the golf tournament coming up?
Want the people to come out and visit us out at Pine Hill. Like I said, April 25th. We got a 8 a.m. Shotgun start. The night before, we're doing a network mixer, opportunity for the golfers to, you know, intermingle and, you know, hopefully business gets done, you know, as well. You know, we got some businesses that'll be, you know, in attendance there. But go to the website, dempscholarshipfund.com. You know, you can always, you know, reach me, 901-799-1003. I'll be happy to direct you where you can go and register or help get you registered. But our goal is to, you know, continue to raise the number of golfers, continue to raise the money, and at the same time pour back, you know, into our community and you know, like I said, hopefully, you know, motivate these kids to go on and pursue their dreams like I've been able to pursue mine.
And that's going to be my next question, my last question. What if somebody's trying to do something productive in their community? What's your advice to that person, male or female?
Male or female, I think it starts first with volunteering. If it's not something that you want to start on your own, check out an organization that may be, you know, traveling down the road that you're thinking about, and just volunteer. You know what I'm saying? See, you know, the work that they put into it, see how they go about it, you know, volunteer at their events and see if that's something that's truly in your heart. But every little bit, I'm saying, helps. You know what I'm saying? Every small, no matter how big the organization, anything you're doing, if what you're doing is helping 3 or 4 kids in your neighborhood, you're doing the same thing we're doing, and you're just doing it on a different level.
I know. That's good, man. Look, Mr. Demps, look, I appreciate everything you're doing. Like I said at first, you get a A++++ in the community. Because look, man, you're doing some great things. And like I said, you're giving back, and I applaud you, man.
Well, I appreciate it. But my thing was, like I told you before, with my dad's situation, like people didn't, they didn't pour into me. And I always said I would never be that person. So if somebody asked me, I'm willing, willing to help them. And then, like I said, it's a single kid coming from Harlem, our goal was just to reach to a certain level, and then, to be able to push through that ceiling. And the things I accomplished now, I do sit back and say, wow, what I'm saying, I didn't,
That's good, man. Look, well, thank you for coming today. Look, hey, and I appreciate the things you're doing for the community. And people, make sure you go out to this tournament. What's the date on it?
April the 25th. We got an 8 a.m. shotgun start at Pine Hill, the links of Pine Hill.
Gotcha. And support. Give back. Look, people, this is Cassius McGowan. We're at Memphis Podcast. Nice seeing you. Yeah.
Oh yeah.